here because we demand clean water from the United States of America.
Eryn Wise stammt von der Jicarilla Apache Nation und dem Laguna Pueblo Stamm in New Mexico. Sie wird als Mutter für das International Indigenous Youth Council bezeichnet und arbeitet für Honor the Earth und viele andere Organisationen an der Ausbildung und Orientierung junger Defender, also Verteidiger heiliger Stätten. Sie hat lange in Standing Rock in bitterer Kälte gegen die Dakota Access Pipeline protestiert und kämpft heute gegen die Pipeline Line 3. Eryn Wise lebt und arbeitet im Gedenken an ihre Vorfahren, die durch ihren Widerstand ihre Existenz sicherten, und ist ein Mensch, so wie du. Neon Green Network begrüßt Eryn Wise.
Hello. Thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you to your First Lady for giving such a wonderful introduction. How lovely it is that you're all able to be proud of your First Lady. That's a change. I first want to say to my elders that are here today, thank you for having me, and to my host, thank you for having me. I would like to ask permission to speak in front of you. I'm younger than many people that are here, and I was taught that it is important that we ask our elders first the ability to speak, so with your permission, I will. And also to the youth that are here, I hope that when you hear me talk, and when I inevitably swear, I'm sorry, that you understand that anger is a valid emotion and that you have the right to be angry in today's society. With that, I'll give you a little bit of history about myself. Dunjo shi kwastue shiji. My name is Eryn Wise, according to the government, but to my people, I am known as Little Bird. I was raised on the Hickory Apache Reservation in northern New Mexico in the southwest. I was raised at the foot of the Rockies, and I was raised by some women who are no longer here with us that I love with all my entire heart. They were my grandmothers, and each of them was the first of their kind, the first to have their masters, the first to run a Department of Labor, the first to run the Department of Education, the first one to ever bring education back to my reservation to create the Hickory Apache Child and Family Education Center that my mother now runs. I come from a very strong line of women who have resisted for as long as I've known them to the United States government infrastructure that was not created for communities of color, and infrastructure built for corporate endeavors. My grandmothers used to tell me when I was a kid, if you ever wanted to know how much the indigenous people were hated by the United States government, that you needed to go to the Dakotas, North and South Dakota, excuse me. I didn't really understand that when I was a child. I didn't really understand why it was that they would say these things, but it would later ring in my mind. I'll explain that. When I was a kid, my grandmother, you'll see them here. The one on in the big picture, that's my grandma Ola. That's my mom's mom. She raised me. I called her mom. And then her sister's in the top left of the picture. Her name was Miriam. And when I was a kid, they would take us out to our family land, and they would have us walk through the ranch, right? We'd be walking through the forest, we'd be walking through the fields, and when I was a little girl, I was often barefoot, naked if I could be. I hated clothes, and I was always walking around barefoot, and when I was walking, I used to tell my grandma, "Oh, Mama, I just feel something. I feel something buzzing beneath me," and she would say, "Do you know what that is?" And I'd say, no, I mean, no, my feet, I never really knew, and then she said, "Those are your ancestors, and they're talking to you." I didn't understand later on when she was gone until I felt that buzzing standing next to her grave, that was my mama talking to me. In 2016, sorry, I'm going to get emotional every time I talk about this, and watching video from Standing Rock also makes me emotional, so I apologize that I don't have any video in my presentation. If you want to see those videos for yourself, I encourage you to look them up online. In 2016, I went to Standing Rock. What had happened and what had led me there was that thought, okay, Indigenous peoples were hated by the United States government. I knew that because I had been born as an ancestor, a descendant of the people that had been brutalized during the genocide that was committed by the United States in order for them to found their country. For the record, I do not consider myself an American. I am a Hickory Apache woman and Laguna Pueblo woman, and my family precedes the United States of America. It's something that I feel very proud of. I know that a lot of people here, you guys get a good laugh at Trump, right? He's pretty obnoxious. I like to think of the time before that, before Trump, before all of these other presidents came, when my people were allowed to be who they were. I got to Standing Rock, and as you could see in the video, all of those teepees, all of those structures, we got there, and the first thing I had noticed was, my little brother and sister who I had unwittingly sent to Standing Rock, and heard my grandma in the back of my mind, if you ever want to know how much they hate Indigenous people, that whispering voice in my ear. And my aunt called me and she said, you sent them up to North Dakota, you have to go protect them. And I get there and you come around this corner, right? You're coming into the camp for the first time and you come around the corner and you just see smokestacks as far as the eye can see. You see these teepees, you see these structures, you see people, and you get on the ground and the earth is vibrating, right? I hadn't felt it like that before, and when I looked around, I thought, man, this is what it would have been like if they had just left us alone. This is what it would have been like if they had just told us that we were worth what we were and that we deserved to have our own space, right? That had never happened before. And then I get to Standing Rock and I see it, and everyone's speaking their own languages, everyone is singing their own songs, everyone is doing their own dances, everyone is feeding each other their own food, and it was so empowering. And then you realize that the movement, in case you didn't know, was started by youth, right? Some of these youth are pictured here. They were young runners that decided that they didn't want the Dakota Access Pipeline put into their backyard, so they did the only thing that they knew how to do. They ran to the White House, and they ran because President Obama had come to their nation, and he had said, after spending a whole 2 hours with you, I just feel like you guys are my kids. I want to treat you like my kids. I'm going to take care of you like my kids. I love Indigenous people, and I'm going to watch out for you. And so the kids, when the pipeline was reintroduced, they thought, what are we going to do? We're going to go find President Obama, and he's going to help us. And so they ran. They ran all the way to the Washington, D.C. They ran to the White House. They got there, and they begged and begged and begged, President Obama, please meet with us. President Obama, please. You said we were like your kids. You said you loved us, and no one answered the door. And these kids were undeterred. They said, well, no one in the White House has ever helped us anyway, and they ran back home. They get home, and the first thing that they do is they go to their grandmothers, their aunties, the women, the life givers, right? And they go to those women and they say, Auntie, Tui, Grandma, Unchi, what is it that we do? We want to fight for our futures. We want to live. It's so bad how much we want to live. Please, what do we do? And so the grandmas and the aunties, they said, well, we're kind of near where Wounded Knee is. I don't know if you're familiar with Wounded Knee. It was the last great Indigenous occupation in the 1970s where the American Indian movement was founded. And they said, why not start a camp? And the kids thought, we love camping, right? No parents, as many snacks as you want. You can sneak cigarettes and no one's going to say anything. They were very, very excited. And so they said, yes, we're going to start a camp. And then they started this camp. And, they opened these camp, and when they opened, there was only 10 people. There were the grandmothers that assisted them, the aunties that helped them open the camps, the ones that had the land to give to the children, and then there were the children themselves. One of the women, her name is LaDonna Brave Bull Allard. She's become one of my aunties, and she opened up Sacred Stone Camp, which was the very first camp in Standing Rock, and the reason she did it was because she said, my son is buried right here, and my father, he's buried right here, and that pipeline is going to go right past their graves. And when I bring my grandsons to come see their daddy, and when I bring my children to come see their daddy, what is it that I'm going to have them looking at? They're going to be praying here, and what? See that pipeline going through their treaty territories? That pipeline that they said no, they didn't want? She said no, and so the camps were opened. The people had begun resisting by the time I got to Standing Rock. I got there in August. In September, a horrible thing happened. We had submitted an environmental impact statement to the state of North Dakota and to the federal government outlining all of the historical sites, all of the burial sites, all of the sacred sites for the Standing Rock Sioux Nation. And that night and early in that morning, Energy Transfer Partners, who owns Dakota Access Pipeline, sent their workers out and they said, go make sure you get rid of all of that before they come and try and tell you that you can't, right? And so that next morning, there were people walking out to the construction site, as we often did, to try and stop construction, but that day, they weren't where we thought they were going to be. Instead, we got a radio warning alerting us that they were digging burial sites up, right? They were churning the earth, and they were bringing up the bones of our ancestors, and the people ran. My Auntie LaDonna, she told all the young women that were there, because it was mostly women, she said, stop them, right? Stop them. Those are our ancestors. Those are our ancestors. The United States government already did horrible things to them. Don't let it happen again. And she pushed the women forward. And they ran and they ran. And the private security saw that people were coming for them, and they had dogs, and they unleashed their dogs on the women. Some of them were pregnant. Some of them had their children with them because they didn't know what was going on, right? And they were attacked. They were horribly wounded. And you know, when I got to Standing Rock, I thought, you know, in that top right picture is one of the women that released her dog. When I got to Standing Rock, I was so in awe of everybody being themselves, reclaiming their identities, reclaiming their power as Indigenous peoples, that I didn't even think for a moment, oh yeah, I'm here to stop a pipeline, right? I had shown up, and my little brother and sister, they had about 30 kids with them, and they said, this is our big sister. She has a wallet, she has a car, and she's going to buy us everything that we need. Don't worry about it. She's super nice and totally a pushover. It's going to be fine, right? Unwittingly became what they called Ina, mother. I didn't realize it until 6 months later that all those late nights where I would beg and beg and beg for these kids to come home, where I would pray on my knees, wherever I was, please don't make me have to call their actual parents. Please don't make me have to call their families and tell them that they've died because a pipeline was being put in their backyard. Everything escalated from the dog attacks. As you can see there, the police, they started using tactics such as tear gas and mace. It was small. We didn't think it was that bad at first. And then it escalated. They started using these rubber bullets, which you can see I have it pictured next to my tattoo. The kids would come home every night, and as we were having dinner, they would put the things on the table that they had been shot at with. Sometimes it was the rubber bullets, sometimes it was beanbags full of metal bits, sometimes it was the tear gas canisters were being shot at them, sometimes it was the concussion grenades that were being shot at them, sometimes it was just big, huge cans of bear mace that they would come and they would find and they would put it down and they would say, look at what I survived today, and they were so proud. I'm sitting there like a big sister, and I'm like, I'm gonna kill everyone. How dare they touch you? How dare they look at you? How dare they tell you that you can't have that pipeline in your backyard or that you can have that pipeline? I was horrified. The horror continued. They attacked our journalists. They targeted them. Because there was a media blackout, any independent journalists that came to Standing Rock were an immediate target. On the bottom left, that's my friend Jonathan. I saw him maced no less than 36 times. He worked with a woman, her name is Sarah LaFleur, who is a good friend of mine, and she was tackled, and then the day that they decided to take her down, the police officers had arranged themselves like a game of football, right? They had set themselves up like linebackers, and one of them set himself up, and they were making jokes, you know, saying hut hut, like they were gonna throw each other a football, and he ran and he tackled my friend. Right, he tackled her to the ground, and it didn't matter who it was. You know, the top girl in the left, she was simply trying to help people that were wounded on the front lines. Her name is Sophia Wolanski. She got shot with a concussion grenade. She has no longer the use of her left arm. They restored it so that she, you know, didn't lose it entirely, but it doesn't work. In the bottom right, my friend Susie, she lost her eye. She was shot at point-blank range with a concussion grenade, and when she fell to the ground, she kept saying, I'm wounded, I'm wounded, I'm wounded, and when people went to go help her, the officers started targeting all of the people that were helping her. It seems a very American thing to do, that when you're down, you hit them as hard as you can, right? through everything that was happening to us, through the mace, through the water cannons that they stuck in the very water that we were trying to protect, to spray us in negative 25-degree weather with the icicles freezing on site. My kids, the kids that had started this revolution, were so strong. Those kids in the water there, those are all my youth council. They were the ones that were trying to prevent all of the other people from getting too angry at the police officers. The police officers, though you can't see it, are standing at the base of this small hill, and we called it Turtle Island, and at the top of it were grave sites. And what they had done was they put the drill pad for the Dakota Access Pipeline on the top of that hill next to those graves. They surrounded it with barbed wire, and when the people tried to get to their ancestors up on that hill to lay down tobacco to tell them, we're sorry, we can't protect you from them, the police officers did that. On the bottom left, you'll see our camp. That's where I lived with my youth. On the bottom right, you'll see us on the day that our north camp was raided. What they did was they came in with their bulldozers, and they arrested over 500 people for praying. They beat up a grandma. They broke her pipe, a chinupa. They beat her up in front of everyone, and then they took everyone to the jails. They shipped them off to different counties around the state, and they put them in glorified dog kennels. They marked them with numbers and permanent marker, and I'm sure you can think of something that's reminiscent of what that must feel like. But no matter the weather, and the weather did come, I can't even tell you how cold it was. You'd walk outside and your nose hairs would freeze, and you just want to die, and you didn't want to be there anymore, and you're walking through the snow, and you're so tired, and God, why is no one helping us, right? No one has ever helped Indigenous peoples, until Standing Rock. We had the most beautiful people from around the world. We had veterans that came, and they were willing to stand in front of those guns and say, shoot us instead. We had people that were coming. We had Greenpeace that were there. They supported us through the Indigenous Peoples Power Project. We had Honor the Earth. We had the International Indigenous Youth Council. And all of the time, all of that people were saying was, we're here in peace and prayer. We're here for the water, and it's not just our water, it's your water. And even though you didn't want it in your communities, your white, wealthy communities, and decided to ship it down to the Indians on the reservation, even though you did that, and we know you did that, we're still going to protect this water because it's your children's future too. We're here as future protectors of the next 7 generations, and that's what we have to do. It's hard for me to talk about this because though it's been 2 years ago, the pressure of what has happened hasn't worn off. Energy Transfer Partners, the company that owns Dakota Access Pipeline, sent people to my mom's house in northern New Mexico, rural northern New Mexico, and they stood outside her house in the middle of the night and they chanted, your daughter is dead, your daughter is dead, your daughter is dead, until it woke my mother up. And she called me and she was crying and she said, are you dead? And I said, no, I'm talking to you. Why are you so upset? And she told me they were men and they were saying, your daughter is dead. And then she went to go drive her car and the bolts had been loosened on the tires. And when she went to back up, the truck fell off of its axles. People, they did a thing called doxing. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but it's basically when they release all of your personal information online. And so I was getting phone calls in droves by the thousands, people telling me that I was going to die, people telling me that they were going to murder me, that they were going to kill all my kids, that they were going to scalp me, because that's apparently what I like to do to other people as an Indigenous woman. And yet, I'm still standing here. A lot of people want to know. Thank you. Nanka. Okay, but really, I always go over my time, so you got to just let me power through this. Thank you very much. But, people ask me a lot of the time, why is it that you do what you do? You're tired. Gosh, you get bitchy sometimes. You're sort of mean. You're selfish, in that you just work all the time, and we want time with you, right? My friends haven't seen me since Standing Rock began. My partner barely sees me when I'm at home. And they ask me, why do you do this? There's a little girl in the picture there. You saw her in my intro. Her name is Riot Cat. Her actual name is Riot. Imagine that. She helped dig the trench for the solar panel that's here And this was in front of our camp in Standing Rock. Somebody had brought us solar energy because the youth council refused to use any propane, refused to use any gas, and they were also refusing to chop the wood that they needed to cook their food. And so what helped was this solar energy that was provided to us. And this little girl, Riot Cat, she was my tail in Standing Rock. She was 3 years old when she came, and she used to walk around saying, "Mani Wachoni, water is wife," right? "Mani Wachoni, water is life." And she would sit on my shoulders wherever we'd go. She refused to be left behind. If we were going to a frontline action, Riot Cat was coming with us. If we didn't bring her with us, the little girl would somehow manage to find someone that she could convince to take her in a vehicle to the front line, and then she'd walk very confidently up to us and just be like, "Hello, you left me." Right? When we were standing on the front lines, she used to go and she'd stand against the fence where all the ancestors' graves had been dug up, and she would lay down tobacco, and at 3 years old, she was praying for them and telling them, "You can go back to sleep. You can go back to sleep. We're going to protect you." And then she'd see the police officers, the lines and lines of militarized police officers, and she'd stand there like just a little girl, and she'd say, "I'm not scared of you police officers. I'm not scared of you planes. I'm not scared of you helicopters. I'm not scared of you." And she would point everything out, right? Because it wasn't enough that we were fighting fossil fuels. They were flying over us day and night, burning as much oil as they possibly could, just as much to rub it in our face, right? When I say that I do this work, I do it in part for little girls like Riot Cat who have that fire inside of them, who for whatever reason at 3 years old knew that fighting for her future was more important than anything else. She didn't know exactly why we were there. She didn't know the logistics. She didn't know the complicated political issues that were happening. She didn't understand why it was that we were so excited one day when we thought the Dakota Access Pipeline was going to be stopped, and then the next day we found out that President Trump had been elected. It's funny, right? Until he's your problem. The day we found out he was elected, all the boys were chopping wood. There were wood chips flying everywhere, and they had tears streaming down their faces. And I asked them why they were so sad, and they said, "Because, Ina, the white man always wins. The white man always wins." And I said, "No, the white man doesn't always win, because what are we? Are we not the very people that they tried to bury for centuries? Are we not the people that they said were worth less than we are? Are we not the people they cut the tongues out of our mouths so we couldn't speak our languages? They cut our hair because they didn't want us to braid it. They cut off our hands. They beat us. They raped us. They're raping our Mother Earth? No. We deserve to be here. The white man does not always win." Now, I want to say something to you, because I heard that in Austria, it's kind of like in the Midwest where you guys think a lot of things, but you don't actually say them. So I really want to touch on the Trump issue here. And when I say that it's funny, until he's your problem right now. He's everyone's problem right now. He's occupying my land with his shitty friends, doing horrible things to the people. He's walking around talking about what he's going to do to women, what he's done to women, and he doesn't care. He talks about communities of color. He doesn't care. He talks about LGBTQ people like me. He doesn't care. And I also know that he supports a group that he, for whatever reason, calls the alt-right. Another thing that Americans do is they don't actually call things by their name. They just make up other names and pretend they're not as bad as they actually are. And so in the alt-right, when he's talking about them, he's talking about Nazis, right? Everyone here is familiar with Nazis. In fact, I've heard more than one of you tell me very casually, "Yeah, we have Nazis in Parliament." Do you realize where we are in the world right now? I know that in Austria you don't have the same perspective that I may have, but do you realize that when you say we have Nazis in Parliament, that means that you have fucking Nazis in your government? It may be really, 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 really hard to hear this, but coming from someone who has had their land occupied for the last 526 odd years, and coming from someone who has actually seen Nazis walking down the street trying to intimidate people I can only assume that it would bear warning for all of you that you would be a little more worried than casually saying, yeah, we have Nazis in parliament. I want to give you some points of action. I want, first of all of you in here, to support your youth. I ask you to support your youth because all of us in here are going to die before they do. Most of us, anyway. And it is not fair that they have been brought into this world when the shit that we have known as existed has not been dealt with. The second thing I want you to do is divest from the banks that you know are investing in big oil infrastructure, and extractive industries. There are several banks here in Europe that are investing in these companies. I work with a wonderful divestment team that spend much of their time coming to Europe to try and impress upon your people that it is so necessary to stop funding these projects. If you want to do something impactful that you can do without anyone even knowing that you're politically involved or an activist, cut your bank card in half. Go to your banker and tell them, you're dealing with some bullshit that I don't want to deal with anymore, and this is why I'm divesting. The third thing I want you to do, and I really, really, really am out of time here, so I'm just going to be short and tell you that the third thing I want you to do is to remember your humanity. We have curated our lives. Imagine my life as this lovely green circle. I don't have to look at anything I don't want to look at. I don't have to talk to anyone that I don't want to talk to. If people don't look like me, I don't have to see them. I can put Google search terms out so that I don't have to see or hear anything about them. Step out of your damn circle and talk to people. If we do not see each other as human beings, if we do not start remembering that at the very most we are more than 70% water, that we are people that have traveled and have survived and have dealt with things. You don't even know anyone's story until you talk to them. Talk to people. Remember that you're a human being, first and foremost, baseline. You don't have to be Indigenous, you don't have to be Hispanic, you don't have to be Black, you don't have to be Austrian, you don't have to be German, you don't have to be anything. All you have to be is a human being that shows up for another human being. I feel very deeply about the fact that water is life, right? On top of preserving, a future for our children, we're preserving a future for the earth, who has her own soul, her own spirit, waterways that have their own spirit. When you speak into the air, my mother never used to let me say bad things because she didn't want the air to have to carry that with it. Think about what you do. Remember your heart. And for God's sakes, stop the fucking Nazis. Thank you.
Wow, this is what you do to people. Eryn, thank you so much. Thank you so very much for this very powerful talk you just gave. You're obviously an amazing woman who is a role model for many, far beyond Indigenous young women. And at the same time, you have to deal with a lot of hatred directed towards you as a person. How do you deal with that?
I think I've talked about this a little bit, but my ancestors were buried in mass graves. My women were raped for fun. The children were given to colonizers, to explorers as gifts, to do whatever they wanted with them. They used to feed little Indian children to dogs just for fun. Nothing that has happened to me can be compared to that. And I've said it before that my ancestors' resistance is my very reason for existing. So I have to deal with things, and I have to put on my brave face, because if I don't, people that have done things like they've done in the past will have the strength and ability and courage to do it again, and how dare they have the audacity to do that.
You are, I feel, just an activist by nature. You cannot help it. How do you think can one light this fire you have inside of you in their own lives, if they're just leading a normal life, going to an office every day?
I would honestly give anything I could to not be so woke or be aware of everything that I know now. I would love to go back to my old life where I was just able to hang out with my girlfriends and flirt as much as I wanted, and hang out with my mom, and my grandmas were still alive and everything was fine, but that's not the case. We are past the tipping point for anything that we thought that we could turn back from. We are only now buying ourselves more time. Becoming an activist, you don't really have a choice. If you are aware of things that you are not doing something to make a change towards, even in a small way, you are accountable for the things that are happening. I think that it's just a necessity for people to acknowledge the fact that we are in a time when none of us are going to be comfortable, none of us are going to be able to shirk the responsibility that we now bear, regardless of our feelings and regardless of what it is you think you can or cannot do. You have to draw upon all of the energy that you possibly can, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get shit done.
Wow, Eryn, you're the toughest act to follow, so we just won't follow you with anything.